Так,
Good afternoon. Happy to see you here. And today I would like to say a few words about the most urgent issues or topical issues which are in the focus of our attention since there are a lot of questions. I'll start with the Crimea, then I'll speak a bit about the heating season, impressions, results, and in the end I also would like to say a few words about the implementation of some of the laws, the market of gas, of electric power, and the National Committee for Regulation of the Energy Supply. So, and then some question and answer session. Speaking about the Crimea, the situation is rather complicated because the overhead lines have been damaged and we do not have any chance so far to renew the supply. You know what measures were taken on Saturday. Well, the idea behind those was rather positive. Near the overhead lines which were damaged, there were a lot of people in that locality, and the Ministry of the Interior tried to convey the message that any kind of disruption or the damage of the cables or the collapse of any of the overhead, I mean the columns or the towers, not only can lead to some kind of the damage, but also the electric power cables, which were under voltage 330 kilovolt, that was fraught with some dangerous or hazardous situations. So they tried to avoid the damage to be, or the, let's say, to be done to any of the people. But you know the situation which took place. Then, according to the experts' information, there were some repeated explosions of the line on the ground. One of them remains vertical, which he's talking about the supports, I understand. But so far, physically, that was damaged by the Kakhovka-Rostrovska, the support of the overhead line in the vertical, but Kakhovka-Janko actually led to its damage. We have several teams of the people with the supports and the cranes, all the necessary materials they prepared to take care of the repair work. Some of the districts in the Khersonsk region, they are vulnerable now because we are talking about the supply of electric power. Those lines are not standardized because that's why there's always the chance that they will be disconnected, and of course, and also in that area we have some of the enterprises, including the chemical enterprise. In the case of disruption or let's say interruption the power supply, this is fraught with some of the bad consequences. We had a number of negotiations with Mr. Jermilev and Chubarov, and we also realized the danger which is associated with some kind of interference in the electric power supply system. So we had some discussion. We tried to convey to them the message, or I mean, the meaning of every measures we are going to take. They understand the importance. They understand that first of all, the Ukrainian citizens suffer because of this situation residing in both sides of this kind of the line. So I hope that in the nearest future we'll be able to restore the status quo. Maybe you have some questions, and then we're going to talk about some global things. 1+1 TV. I have three questions today in the cabinet ministers. Prime Minister actually reproached you that you signed the agreement with the Crimean Federal District. The structure it doesn't exist actually. How could you sign that agreement? First off, I did not personally signed this agreement. You saw that contract agreement in the internet. We had rather big discussion in February this year, and I repeatedly, more than once, I showed you the original copy where there was no mention of the federal district. I don't know where he took this information. The documents were sent to the general prosecutor's office, and there was some investigation in place based on that, because I do not know what grounds you have to ask about that. Speaking about that agreement per se, you know, I would like to say that in fact, what kind of options did we have? The supply of the electric power was in place before the year 2015. It's the tech actually, when they supplied the power supply without any payment. Everybody was happy about that. When the Ukrenergo stepped in, the governmental company, and they started to actually to pay for that into the budget and make some money for the country. Nobody likes that. On the Ukrainian part, well, Ukrenergo is involved. That was your second question. No, that was not the continuation of the first one. That was the second question. When the electric power overhead support collapsed, the expert said that you intentionally decreased this capacity not to accumulate the money in the tech. Now I provide my explanation to those most talented ones. Without the power supply, we cannot regulate the nuclear power supply, and we try to regulate that by the first very careful steps. First of all, we disconnected in Dnipropetrovsk power plant in order to regulate the power supply in the territory of Ukraine. Each of those power units, each of the 24 megawatt, they had to be taken care of for the whole system. The subsequent steps were that was short-term decision. Also, there was a kind of redirection of the electric power to the territory of Belarus and the Russian Federation. We are talking about the operational technological system. After that, which we didn't want, of course, to happen, we introduced some additional measures, decrease of the let's say, of the load of the heat generation. And we are talking here about some of the factors. Night hours, when the consumption is lower, then rather high temperature days and temperature, well, we are talking about the lower consumption, the weekends, the night hours. So some of the factors, there was a coincidence of some of the factors. We didn't have any consumer to direct this generated power to. Then we decreased the loads of some of the NPPs or some of the power plants, and it was done over a period of time, several iterations, and not one of the power plants, but several of them. You read the statistics, there's no sense to repeat those. And I talked with some of our colleagues from the Crimea that tried to explain that, in fact, all those processes, if they're not planned or not scheduled, they actually is something which requires our attention. And in fact, the process, we managed to avoid some, let's say, irregular modes or irregular situations. And what's the problem? The text power plants remained in the operational mode because the majority of them during the 8 hours they operate with a minimum set, so-called minimum set of equipment, and based on the wholesale market regulations, the decrease of more than 2 power units does not meet those regulations. That's why the tech followed those rules. Perhaps logical was to decrease the load of the heat power plants or the thermal power plants instead of decreasing the load on the nuclear power plants. But they are following the market regulations rules. So they use now the expensive electric power plants of the tech than the nuclear power plants. But those are the rules which were written by the techs themselves. Those are the rules of the market. And you, no, 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 enough for you.
Please don't shut up the journalist. You asked 3 questions. You see how many people you violate the law on mass media. What will you tell about today's decision of Cabinet of Ministers to introduce the full blockade of Crimea? That's the decision of the Cabinet of Ministers. That is the 3rd question. Thank you. You will ask. Look at how many people. Interfax Ukraine had a question. There are 20 people here. I believe everyone is interested in what are the expectations and the moods in your ministry to continue the contract, to sign a new one. We are executing the decision of the Cabinet of Ministers. Last year, such decision was made. We executed it. This year, we will see what decision will be made. That is a political decision. I'm sure that in the nearest time there will be the meeting of the National Security and Defense Council. The decision will be made, we'll execute it. And as to Khersonska region, we don't understand that there are different interpretations. The Ukrenergo says that these 2 micro districts have no problems. The only problem they have, there's no reserve line. But you say there are some problems. Is there anyone without electricity in Kherson region? As far as the specialist reported to me, they were making certain measures to contact the regions which were disconnected. About 30,000 subscribers and different consumers. These works were quite quickly done. The high voltage line was disconnected and other lines were resolving that problem. To say that there's no problem, it's difficult. When there is a balanced system, use of other resource impacts the capacities. These lines were used. They were supplying to other facilities, so they were rechanneled to address the existing problem. What may happen, that's not within my competence. I am responsible for energy sector. Please remind how much electricity for what amount of money we supply to Crimea. And and there are rumors that Russia blocked the sale of anthracite coal. Is that true? Will we be looking for some other markets? We are not supplying electricity at all. We were usually supplying at night from 470 megawatt to 1000, 1050 megawatt, depending on the consumption. That's approximately 15, 18 million kilowatt a day. The cost of 1 kilowatt is 395 rubles. But the exchange rate changes every day. per 1 kilowatt. On coal, there's a lot of information. There is a mixed up information. I am negotiating additionally with other participants because coal is brought by companies, not ministries. Some have difficulties, some don't. There's no sense to say something definite. I don't know the reason. Some don't have diesel, some. I haven't heard about that decision. News of Donbass. Today, the workers of Krasnoarmeysk Ugal went on strike. They say that the salaries are not paid to them for September, October. Is there any problem of restoring the infrastructure of your ministry? The infrastructure, our infrastructure of our companies. Okay, as to Krasnoarmeysk Vuhila, there is some debt. You are right, for September and October. Part of September was paid. I didn't take the figures, some part is paid. Not the whole month was paid. Talking about the formula of payment, the payment takes place on the 20th of the next month. So there is the debt for September, and for October we just have accrued this debt recently. It's related to the fact that the company produces, mines a very small amount of coal. As you know, the company doesn't have any state support. So we, as the ministry, we put all our efforts into rechanneling the resource which is there. But now, when there's no state support, the money could be taken partially at the expense of someone else. All companies understand that, and they're trying to use the resource they have maximum efficiently, because paying to Krasnogorsk Vugila will mean that I have to take money from someone else and give it to Krasnoarmeysk Vugila. That would be unfair in respect of those who operate efficiently. I have 350 million hryvnias which are in the budget this year, which I plan to redistribute for salaries and will be paying the debts. That is the money that was planned for reorganization and liquidation of companies. The money wasn't used because we had to review all the projects on liquidation. That took time. You remember also the campaigns of the miners, of trade unions. So now we are redistributing this money to pay salaries to miners. By the end of the year, I'm sure this money will be used and we'll be able to pay to Chervonoarmeysk Vugila. As to infrastructure and the line, and the contact line, there are several coal mines located, the electricity transmission lines, Ukrenergo, Lugansk Energetyczna Об'єднання, Donetsk Oblenergo. We are restoring the lines. Till there were shellings, this work was going on more actively. Now we cannot take the risk, and such works are done when possible, the coal mines. If there are shellings, then we cannot do anything. When they stop, we restore the works. There's the plan to connect Lugansk thermal power plant with sub-plant Mikhailivka, which is on the non-controlled territory, in order to increase the supply to Lugansk power plant. There were some works done in near sub-plant Zarya, Starobishevska. These lines were restored. Unfortunately, it all depends on the situation. Crim reality. 2 questions. The contract for supply of electricity to Crimea, does it continue automatically, or should the parties inform in advance? And also, can Russia disconnect some part of the territory of Ukraine from electricity? I will start from the second question. Our systems operate in parallel, but neither Russian Federation nor other neighbors have any impact on the territory of Ukraine. When we lack capacity in our system, there is reflow from their system to our. Now there are no limitations. We have some capacity, and that is why we do not depend on Russian Federation. As to the agreement, the contract until the 31st of December, whether it will be extended or not, this will be decided by the Cabinet of Ministers. Technical preparatory work, the agreement is in force now, it's active, and everything related to that agreement is effective now. There's no problem of principle. ATR TV channel. I would like to ask, Dzhemiliev said that people will not be suffering on continental part of Ukraine, and he's ready.
Kherson, Zaporozhye, 2 lines.
Two lines. To ask to repair. That does not depend on my order. I issued that order on Friday. Unfortunately, we receive information from law enforcement bodies who have to ensure the access to this territory. There's information that some facilities could be mined because physically these poles were blown up using explosives. That's not the first time we see that there are different accidents possible. The military have to demine, and they will ensure access to this territory. Our team is close by there, and they're ready to start working. Crim Reality project, as to in whose interest this contract was signed, how much had the state or private company earned? Because Legrinsky said that the state of Ukraine had losses. The agreement was signed in the interest of the state of Ukraine. It was signed by the state company, which received the instructions from the Cabinet of Ministers. During these 10 months, the agreement brought some profit. It's about 3%, but taking into account a big volume, it's more than 300 million hryvnias during 10 months with the turnover of 8 billion hryvnias. So I believe the agreement is profitable from commercial point of view, but it's not about commerce. It's not about commerce. The margin 3% is just executing the decision of the Cabinet of Ministers.
Crimean News, Volodymyr. Can you please tell us, you personally, how do you evaluate under the conditions of occupation with the lot of repressions when the Ukrainian Tatarian patriots are just murdered in the Crimea, literally speaking? So, from the moral point of view, is it possible to supply some kind of electric power and anything else? Once again, I can tell you that, well, I understand that the decision, both yes or no, will be criticized anyway. On the other hand, I'm not going to go into details in the legal details, rights, and the duties. We understand only too well that without electric power, any territory actually is subject to probable humanitarian crisis, problems, etc. That's why I already mentioned that. I can't say anything new. I'm positive in order to return this territory back to Ukraine, we have to respect the people there. And all this story that we are going to influence in this way, or in fact the military servicemen or the policemen, who maybe are involved in those things which you're mentioning now. I believe in that, but and understand that. But on the controlled territory, there are more than 10, more than a dozen high power generators which can guarantee 150 megawatt of electric power, which they can generate. Also, there are some of the heat supply systems in Simferopol, Saki, Kerch, which can additionally produce or generate 100 megawatts. So we are talking today that in some of districts the supply of electric power continues. The system is not integrated, it's not synchronized because several sections are kind of separated. Some territories where they generate this power and supply this electric power, the system is not stable, and that's why I believe that we can just guess what kind of negative consequences are present for the people from the street like you and me. Real news. You as a minister, are you going to recommend to terminate the contract at the meeting of the National Defense Security Council, or are you going to support that? And what kind of situation, this kind of situation can affect our relations in the natural gas supply sphere? Maybe the Russian Federation will stop the supplies. Yeah, actually, that was one of the issues we discussed with the activists. There is the problem with the coal or the diesel supply or nuclear fuel in the same natural gas issue. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not energy independent. We are energy dependent. I can give you. I do not want to repeat here how much nuclear fuel or the natural gas we are purchasing. Under the circumstances, we have to take some very well balanced steps. But as I mentioned before, most important, we have to realize, understand all the pros and cons. And the cons are now overweight, and that's why we take those decisions. My task within my competence or the jurisdiction of our ministry to evaluate all cons and pros and recommend something. I have only one vote in the Cabinet of Ministers. I'm going to represent all cons and all pros. The LA question. I have the question regarding the line which we have to restore. There are 4 lines, and which is the most critical to the Ukrainian energy system. to speak which we should start with. The one we'll have in our disposal, we have to start with that. The discussion, which is more valuable, which not, is a kind of conventional issue. For example, the Strovsk, Kakhovka-Strovsk substation. This overhead line is more technologically prepared because the tower is in the vertical condition, but the foundation has been ruined. So this is kind of temporary decision to be taken. We can, slightly after some of the expense, we can to some extent restore that. We have to replace the tower itself. That's why we set up 6 separate teams which can independently work on the different facilities or projects. You mentioned that it will take you 72 hours to restore everything, if you have the nexus. Again, I repeat myself, we are prepared to work in parallel to that. The complete maintenance will take 5 days. If you are talking about replacement of all the lines, we are going to include a big resource. Of course, we are talking about very sophisticated or complicated overhead lines, towers. There's 3 more questions. Mr. Minister, I have the following question, which is related actually what was before everything happened. You know that the Ukrainian energy system until this day actually is part of former Soviet system. Have they taken any kind of measures or steps in order for the Ukrainian system becoming independent of the CIS or the Russian Federation system to be a part of the European? Yes, of course, the project for synchronization of Ukrainian system with the Ukrainian system is part of our plan of actions of the government, and it's part of the 2020 program. That's why everybody understands in which direction our system is going to be further developed. But we have to prepare ourselves for that. We actively work today with Moldova and Romania on some partial synchronization with their system. The so-called Bushman Island has been already synchronized with them. 2.5 million Ukrainian population works in the European energy system today. So this process we take care of now, and we plan to expand this in the future. But this will take time. In order to synchronize, we have to ensure the balancing capacities. We have to test the part of the system independently, because, as you understand, Europeans do not want to have some additional load on their system. They really want to have the strong partner, powerful partner. This will take several years. Ukraine news. Either any penalties provided for the interruption of the supplies which took place? I'm sure they're going to qualify that as the force majeure, the acts of God. I hope that we are not going to reach the situation where there will be some court proceedings. We have the task to restore the overhead lines, to renew the electric power supply, to ensure the security and safety of the people who reside near those overhead lines or that territory. You understand well. The lines which are not under voltage, this spells a very difficult situation. What are the damage incurred by Ukraine as a result of the collapse or the disconnection of those electric power supplies grid? So now, do all the residents of the Kherson regions have the power supply today or not? In the last question, the activists of the blockade of the Crimea, they say That says that hasn't been any additional explosion, that the towers collapsed as a result of the strong wind. Speaking about what caused the collapse of those supports, the towers, there must be experts' opinion. There are some witnesses who can and agree to give their testimonies to both the Minister of Interior or the SBU. Actually, they can investigate into that matter, how the structure was damaged or collapsed because of some external effect or because of the wind. The most important is that to make sure that there are no explosives left on that territory, because this will actually jeopardize anybody who is going to take care of the maintenance. Speaking about the damages incurred, definitely all those 4 towers will have to be replaced. They are absolutely damaged. We will have to replace or to substitute part of the cables. This will several million hryvnia, the material damage incurred by the Ukrenergo, and I'm sure that we are going to address the competent bodies and agencies to take care of the investigation and receive some compensation, because we are talking about the elimination of the public property. It's very difficult to say who is going to do that, because the electric power supply is kind of uninterrupted, actually. Procedure, I don't know what is going on now, but most important is to ensure taking the standardized decisions or solutions. Some temporary or the emergency decisions, they are not stable. Thank you. Please, the last one. Speaking about the winter package, I'm coming back to the natural gas supply. Do we have to some additional formalization of that procedure? Do we have to sign any other documents, or everything's in good order? Anyway, it's still valid. We received the confirmation from our European partners and from the Russian Federation, to the tune that everybody perceived this contract as a valid one. It's very difficult to look deep into the legal component of that contract, whether all the articles are being implemented or not. Until now, they were, or they have been. Speaking about the contract itself, it actually fulfills its function, which is most important. A few words about the procurement, the purchase of natural gas. Okay, maybe briefly about the heating season. As of today, consumption both of gas and electric electric power and the heat, due to, I'm sure we already demonstrated the statistics, and consumption by the industrial enterprise, by households and Teplokamenergo are much lower than last year. On the average, we are talking about 17-19%. If we're talking about gas, and 13-14% if we're talking about power supply. So the resources which we managed to accumulate in the natural gas and the underground storage, we had at the beginning of this season 17.1, now we have 16.5 billion cubic meters, and as compared to the previous year on December the 1st, we had approximately 14 billion. So this kind of gap between the reserve in this year and last year, so I mean the difference is on the increase. Actually, this difference will be 2 billion cubic meters, which actually is an evidence that we prepared well to this year heating season. And those critics who were telling all those scary stories, I think they have to realistically evaluate the situation. Speaking about the electric power, rebalancing in favor of the nuclear power supply. We plan to connect the Rivne-Kiev power supply lines by 20th of December, which have to balance the Rivne and Khmelnytsky NPPs. This is an important step to be taken, which hasn't been taken for 20 years now. This will allow us to daily save up to 10 tons of coal daily. And it seems to be a absolutely correct decision taken. Owing to the EBRD and the World Bank, we managed to implement those projects. As regards the coal reserves, despite the constant speculation that we have not enough reserves of coal, today 2.2 million approximately we have at the thermal TPPs, and over 2,000 we have the CHPPs. It's almost 1 million tons more than the same period last year. But the problem is not how much reserve we have, but how we are going to deliver that. In the nearest future, we are going to actually in Yuzhny port we expect the coming of the next vessel bringing this coal. I can hear the question. I didn't follow that. You can actually approach the law enforcement agencies, may they give you the answer. Just to sum up, also there is another issue. We are talking about the preparation for the heating season. We are talking about technological situation. We came through all the procedures to prepare the emergency reserve of the fuel oil in order to be prepared in some extreme situations, for to switch over to the emergency mode of providing electric power. We received necessary certificates regarding our preparedness for the heating season. The tech regarding they prepared well. I believe they even increased the possibility to recover more, to produce more coals in their coal mines. So we try to reorientate to a maximum possible extent the generation of electric power. Using the coal, specifically those power plants which use the coal as a fuel. So try to use the grade G coal mostly. It's possible also to decrease the load on the anthracite coal power plants. I believe this will be a very important decision today. We have already some information that they started they stopped the delivery of the coal, but actually this information hasn't been confirmed 100%, so we shouldn't talk about that yet. I'm sure there are a lot of cons and pros, and this issue is going to emerge and re-emerge all the time. And don't forget that we find ourselves in a state of war. So anyway, we have to touch upon that issue for the provision of the coal supplies all the time and try to take care of the technical issues all the time. This is the interfax for Ukraine. Speaking about gas, do you plan any payments or the settlement of payments with the Gazprom or not? As of today, indeed. I already mentioned. The expectations are lower than we expected. We had in the underground storages enough, a sufficient amount of gas without further purchase of those. There are some of the reasons why we should not additionally purchase the natural gas, because we expect that during the first quarter next year the price will be lower, and so far we are quite comfortable. Yeah, we are talking about the reserves of the gas, so there is no critical need to take care of the advance payments. But taking into consideration the price disproportions, we purchase some gas on the reverse line, something about 30 million cubic meters per day. You mentioned that the rules of the market do not meet the interests of our market. I remember you attended. We had 5 votes in the tech and 5 votes on the democratic forces. So, what are your plans for the future? Each decision principle is taken in a very complicated way. That's why there are two possible decisions to reform the Council of this structure, or to switch over to some other market conditions. We already have a lot of players who are the participants who participate in the preparation of this draft law. We are talking about Mr. Kovic and the World Bank who start to provide their comments, and the U.S. experts who help us to prepare for the heating seasons. And the more advisors we have, the more difficult it is to pass a decision. There are a certain point of time we have to pass a decision. That's why I believe on Wednesday we're going to have the meeting with the Energy Society reps, and I believe that we are going to submit that the finalized document for the consideration of cabinet ministers. And according to that law, in compliance with that law, the wholesale market council will have some kind of the let's say advisory functions as well. Sorry? Please understand, if the organization will not fulfill their functions, nobody will be interested in that organization, whether they have 1 vote or 10. The advisory, or let's say recommendation vote, actually my recommendation was each player have only 1 vote, because we are talking about kinds of consultative or recommendation nature body. All the decisions taken will be coordinated with with that structure. So why should we have the several votes for 1 player? Well, and I believe that the year 2017 is quite close to us now. Speaking about coal, you actually said a few words about Central Energy. But recently, the tech came up with a statement that they are prepared to sell the quote for 1,050, but they refused that proposal. So what is the best for that decision? I suspect this is partial commercial decision. 1,450 is much. It's a bit expensive, taking into consideration the proposal of the tech. This is cheaper than 1,600. When the tech can supply their coal, we can buy that coal for 1,100. When the tech cannot supply the coal, then there is nothing else but to pay $57 for the coal from the South Africa, when we do not have a possibility to bring that coal from the occupied zone. Again, when we have some problems with supply of the uncontrolled territory, when the tech does not deliver that, so the tech actually is competitive with other suppliers who sell the coal for 1,100 hryvnia. And the tech has a very nice story, but we need the coal when we do not have the coal, when they cannot supply that or deliver that coal. But to sign a contract and have a possibility and to have an alternative to bring it for cheaper, you have to read the reports at Tripoli station. 100,000, the other one, 700,000. Another question. shortly speaking, I would like to say a few words about the laws. So when we have about 10 minutes left, then can please tell you now we can see the crisis of reproduction or reproduction code. No, not the extra production, but the drastic reduction of consumption because of the, for example, in the United States, the gas is sold for $80 for 1,000 cubic meters. You take in consideration that we just open the throttle, to consume that. Yet the fact is that we have a much fewer number of the let's say of the emissions, or the gas which go into the flare, when we are talking about $40 per coal in the United States and $80 for gas, everybody switch over to the gas and they sell the coal to Europe. So my question: last year we purchased the coal for $40, and this year $50 or $60. Why we cannot say no to the occupants? Through the Ukrainian maritime ports, seaports, we can bring the coal, which would be sufficient only to do 66% of the consumption requirements. So the throughput capacity of the seaports is not sufficient. We can bring 370, 380 tons per day, but we consume 30,000 per day. So we consume or burn much more than we can bring through the seaports. We could make some reserves in summer period of time when we consume 25,000 per day, well, 20, the minimum 20,000. But now we have to burn 600,000, but we do not have a possibility to ensure or to bring in the coal, enough coal through the seaports. You are right. In several years from now, we have to resolve that problem, to bring in the coal from outside, so to say. And I repeatedly mentioned that it's better to decrease the consumption by 5 million tons. That's what we are doing. We are trying to take care of the additional line, Zaporizhzhia-Kakhovka. We are doing something about that, but for dozens of years they did not take care of that. But now want me to do that overnight. And 10 more minutes for the third block of issues. Can you say a few words specifically? Are you going to insist to sign the contract with the Crimea, or the director of the Crimea electorate for Viktor Plakida, who is now a wanted person? So, ask the law enforcement agents about that. He actually signed that he doesn't have any objections against technical issues. Speak to the lawyers about that. Moreover, the contract itself, in addition to Crimea Energo, just read this contract with the seal of the Crimea Energo. He wrote that there are no relations with the Crimea Energo. We just understand that through the agreed electric power is coming through, There are no relations. He doesn't have any rights or duties under that contract, period. Are you going to insist to sign those contracts or not? I'm not going to insist, I'm going to recommend. Okay. The third module. Very briefly, I would like to say a few words about our preparation of 3 laws, or draft laws. I already mentioned that last time. Tomorrow are 2 draft laws which we submitted to the Verkhovna Rada, and I hope they will be considered. I'm talking about the amendments to the tax code and the customs code. Mostly we are talking about some technical things, but we have to adopt those anyway. I'm talking about those draft laws which accompany the work or the law on the natural gas market. the gas market operates now. We have some results now. The foreign traders and importers came to that market, which drastically affects, sufficiently affects the Naftogaz activities. They lost about 25% of their bonus segment in the industry, which stimulates the competition. And since Naftogaz is a public entity, I believe that its competition with Naftogaz will make it force it to be more active in this market. So I believe we have already some results. The response on the part of the price formation, you know that the price for gas decreased drastically during this month. I believe this is a very positive effect of introduction of that law, and I believe we'll be able to very fastly adopt those legislative acts or bylaws in order to eliminate those controversies and to decrease the number of the argument of this debated issues. We are talking about the redistribution of some of the electric power supply. There are some of the interesting things which we meet with the resistance along those lines, and why those issues have not been submitted to Verkhovna Rada for their consideration. But I believe the truth will win eventually. Speaking about the electric power market, I already mentioned that. There is certain final stage which we reached, misunderstanding. There is a discussion in the process between the National Committee for the Power Regulation and the World Bank. Some people say that the transition period between the present form of this market and the so-called new market must be a rather lengthy period. Transition period. We came through that process related to the gas supply relatively quickly, and also tried to defend the position that we have to move as fast as possible. Some of the players say that we should not make any haste, and we have to spend several years to do that. So my opinion is we have to start to do something about that, and then we'll see whether we'll be able to take specific care of the secondary legislation and how the market is going to operate through the cabinet or through the National Committee to regulate this situation during the transition period. The second law, which is also very important, about the National Committee regulator. Unfortunately, we do not have that law in place. They just been drafted, and everybody has voted for that. And actually, it's sitting in the Verkhovna Rada now. We haven't reached the stage of voting for that. Actually, we are building a new gas market and new electric power market. That's why we need independent, powerful, and professional regulator. That's why we have to give the authorities to this body, and to actually allocate the necessary financial resources for it to be independent and protect the interests, first of all, of the consumers, and be the arbiter and the market. And that's why this is a very important law, and every time I remind the need to adopt this law. I hope that they will hear me. Any other questions? So, please. The last question for today, maybe. 112 TV channel. Is Russian Federation, can they actually supply enough electric power to the Crimea, because they start to convey such an information that Russia plans to build the energy bridge to the Crimea? Theory is a theory. Just a simple example. For some reason, they did not do that during the Soviet times. Maybe there was no need for that. I'm kind of disputing this issue with myself. So even if they take care of building this energy bridge, we are talking about 100 to 1200 kilowatts, and when they need the 1000, there is no decision in place. Even if they supply the power energy to power to Kerch, the Kerch has to supply it to the center part of the Crimea. So this is a very difficult decision. on the bed of the sea or let's say underwater, and the engineers can understand how complicated this task is. I don't know. They already tried to build a physical bridge. I don't know how they're going to take care of this specific bridge. Please understand, this is not the question. What we are for that or not, for them to build this bridge or not. We don't want to supply them with the electric power to them. I mean, so let them take care of building this energy bridge and supply the energy for the people who live there. Natalia Prutka. Okay, the last question from the super expert. You know, who wants no law to be from the regulator for 13 years? This committee was headed by Martin, because so many presidents were coming and going, like the prime ministers, and he's still there. So your question is about the national regulator or the Martinenko. We understand that he personally blocks the decisions to be taken. I cannot say that. This law was supported by his committee, and he has been submitted for consideration over Honorada. I believe that his position is rather constructive. Speaking about who could be interested in that, definitely the one. This depends on regulator per se. We understand the scope of the energy market. We understand only too well the effect of this market. This is a purely political issue, which boils down to one thing or to two items. I am positive that those items, issues can be resolved during one meeting, and I hope that this decision will be taken and this law will be voted for in the nearest future. We can actually vote for that tomorrow. More questions? That's it. No more questions. Just one clarification. EBRD money which they have to allocate or they plan to channel to us, you're going to have some tender? Yes. Tender for the procurement, it's reasonable to do that when we have the funds for that, not for the gas proper. This we are talking about some procedure, preparation and procedure. We have to prepare all the necessary papers, the documents, etc. And the last one, what is the way out of the situation for the Crimea? How they are going to take care of the generation? Do they have to buy this electric power from Ukraine or from Russia or whatever? You know, I think. Yeah, again, we're talking about the natural gas or the fuel oil block. It's a very difficult issue. You remember the scope of the Chernobyl gas, whatever. Partially, they can resolve that issue at the expense of the solar energy, alternative sources of energy. We are talking about the alternative technologies to be used. I believe that within 2 or 3 years they will resolve this problem. But I hope that we are going to resolve this problem, not them. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for the fact you find the time each week to come here and answer journalists' questions. Our next briefing in about half an hour from now.